Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're situated while you're listening to this podcast. Stoy here once again. This time I'm joining you from Bucharest, Romania. I did a training for Startup Wise Guys, a leading acceleration program here in Europe, and I didn't have a chance to make it home before recording this podcast. So, for those of you who are watching the video, you probably see my hotel room. Ellie was, she managed to guess where I am. So hope you guys are having an amazing day. I'm very excited about this episode to dig into a topic that I think hasn't really been explored much for a number of reasons. And I have just the right person for the job, Ellie Gosheva, who's the managing partner at Dynamis Group, a company that's specialized in executive search, leadership succession, and being at the forefront, the leader, the innovator when it comes to leadership due diligence. And don't worry if you don't know this term, we're going to go deep into that. And what I really love about Dynamis Group, and I had a chance to partner up on a few projects with the guys, is they're not just super good professionals and really good at what they do, but they incorporate caring for the people, caring for the client, caring for all details in anything they do. So we're really matching on this kind of trait. So I'm very excited to welcome you on the podcast. Ellie, good morning. You had your
Good
morning coffee
morning.
already?
I am just having it now, and you know what? By the looks of it, I can just sit here quietly, and you can keep going because I'm loving it.
There you go. Love the energy. So Ellie, give us a bit of a context. How did you end up first in executive search, and then starting Dynamis Group, being part of the journey? Give us a bit of the perspective. How did you end up doing what you do today?
Like, I think all beautiful things in life, a little bit by chance. I had a beautiful opportunity when I was younger to do, the usual things, school and professional sports for quite some time, which somehow led me to the States. I went to study there when I was 18 or so. And I loved it. I wanted to stay. I ended up graduating there and moving to Washington, D.C. And I had this almost naive idea that I want to work in politics because only through politics can you really change people's lives. I had this real perception that you can change so much communities, societies, people's lives through politics. So I went to where the center of politics is, I think, which is DC. And I ended up working for the largest political consultancy business there for some time. And it was an interesting journey, and it was a little bit of a sobering one as well. And I made a transition back to Europe several years later. And really by chance, I ended up in executive search. It was an opportunity where I had the chance to work with amazing people and apply some of the skills I had, apply the international mindset I had accumulated, the understanding of different cultures, the ability to work with different people who come from various industries, completely new technological backgrounds or know-how or level of seniority even. And over time, I ended up meeting who is my business partner now, back then my mentor and my colleague and my boss. And after several years working together quite intensely, we said, you know what, we have a vision of how we can do things and how we can do things differently, better, with a much more holistic view, both when it comes to the internal and the external environment. In other words, both our clients and our partners, but also the team within the business. And this is how we set up Dynamis. Dynamis Group today is, I think, a very high value talent consultancy. We provide integrated services for a lot of global corporations, starting everywhere from startups to mid-size to large conglomerates all across the world. We work in more than 50 countries today. And what we do is we help them when it comes to their periods of growth, their periods of transformation, sometimes when they are in a period of difficulty or a challenge. And we help them with what matters most, which is people. We help them with talent, we help them with leadership, and we help them with the cultures they had. And it all started from this know-how and this competency in executive search. This was the core of what we do. It's the core of what we've been trained to do and what we know very well.
In a
But
few
we
words,
wanted,
for people who never heard about the term executive search, can you just paint the picture? What does it mean?
of course I can. Executive search is supporting organizations when it comes to attracting exceptional talent to their structures. In very few words, what we do is we understand deeply what the organization needs at this point of time, but also in the mid to long term based on their strategy. And we identify and attract on their behalf the leader that is right for them in this point of time. This is executive search, is matching amazing talent with amazing companies. But this is purely the center of what we do. We said, this is a great service, it's a needed service, but we can expand on it, because what happens with this talent once they land in the company? And this open up our mind to saying, you know what, we need to provide an onboarding service so that we can help them onboard with the months following an appointment. Also, what happens with companies that are very visionary and they think long term? So we designed strategic leadership succession. And then we said, you know what, let's raise the level of complexity. What happens with companies that are buying other companies? What happens in the very difficult time of M&A? What happens with people? Because this is a time of anxiety, it's a very sensitive time, it's a challenging time, and it's one that's always riddled with a bit of tension. And we said, can we use what we do and what we know and what we're good at to support both the acquirer and the company that is being bought? And this is how we designed leadership due diligence.
Yes, and now we're going to another term for many people listening who are wondering, what is leadership due diligence? What is really leadership due diligence? Why is it something new? And of course, why is it important in this day and age?
You're right, it's a very new solution. I wouldn't say it's been around on the market for a long time. What has been around on the market for a long time is deal makers' almost preoccupation with investing in financial due diligence, in legal due diligence, and commercial due diligence. So they deep dive into a lot of these very quantifiable, tangible, numerical almost topics. What they don't do, though, is they don't look at the leadership of the company they buy. So through financial due diligence and legal due diligence, you get an amazing understanding of the factors behind the past performance of the company. Through leadership due diligence, you get the best possible indicator for future performance of a business, because there is no better predictor of future performance than people. It's people that actually directly impact everything there is within a company. And we said, you know what? We can support deal makers, we can support business leaders by providing them insights and know-how into critical topics like, who are your key performers within an organization? What is their culture like? What are the red flags? What are the challenges you need to be mindful of? What is the roadmap for integration you need to start thinking of even before you have bought this company? How can you plan on ensuring you provide the right environment, the right ambience, the right rules and processes in order for this organization to be successful once you buy them? And a lot of these things they're difficult because, M&A is not an exact science. This is not physics, this is not math. However, the more tangible and the more specific it can be, the better, because there's safety in numbers. There's almost a psychological safety in numbers. I think if you can quantify something, you can measure something, you can justify a decision because it's quantifiable. And this is why, to a big extent, people haven't been doing leadership due diligence, because it's difficult to quantify. It's people at the end of the day. How do you quantify people? It's the soft topics of leaders, of talent, of culture. I don't really think there's anything soft about any of these topics. They're quite important, they're quite difficult, they're quite hard. But unless you really zoom into them, I think you'll never be able to have the full information. And information is power. So the more information you have, the better decision you can make.
I couldn't agree anymore. I guess the term soft skills came, well, I don't know, but I think it came because the more mathematical, analytical, they were used to called hard skills. Okay, so then
Yeah.
these more leadership culture, they started being called soft skills, but because it's harder to measure them, and then again, that's the, I guess, the $1 million question, right? Which is also the title of our episode. How do you measure the unmeasurable? Super curious to figure that out.
So am I. And we've been trying here with our team and colleagues to figure that exactly because at the end of the day, you need to be able to put some numbers in what you do. You need to be able to make it tangible for people to connect with and understand. And look, it's still difficult, it's still a journey, but I think numbers often speak for themselves. And if you look into it, 50% of acquisitions fail to realize their expected value because people leave post acquisition. 40% of talent in an acquired company is going to leave in the first 2 years. Can you imagine that? More, I think it was something like 1/3 of deal makers say that the most important thing for value creation is the culture of the company. And then you start looking at examples. Imagine a case where, imagine this small family owned business is being bought by a large publicly listed organization. The owner now is imposing a lot of processes, a lot of structures, a lot of procedures on them. The family owned business is drowning in that. They have lost what makes them successful, they have lost their USP, they have no idea what to do. And the big guys, without having the thorough understanding of how the small guys operate, they completely fail the opportunity to create value out of the deal. Imagine a case where two fairly equal sized companies, one buys another one, and then they don't really know who is the real value driver, who is behind the driving seat. It might not be the CEO, it might be somebody slightly hidden somewhere within the company, it might be head of sales. You lose them for one reason or another in these first 2 years, and then they take away all the important client relationships. They take away everything that brought them revenue. So where is the value in that? I'll give you an example which I think a lot of people would have heard of. At the turn of the century, Daimler buys Chrysler. Is this giga mega deal in the automotive world. And I was reading somewhere, one of the CEOs, I think the CEO of Chrysler said, this is match made in heaven. This cannot fail. So what happens is they spend something like 34 billion or above 30 billion buying the business. Now, Daimler is this very German, very process-oriented business. They're buying Chrysler, which is an American organization. Completely different take on hierarchy, decision-making, risk aversion, speed, innovation, culture, leadership style, all of it. Where is the tangible in the metrics here? Daimler ends up selling Chrysler several years later for 7 billion. So they lose more than 20 billion in this deal. And if this is not tangible and if this is not measurable, I don't know what is. At the end of the day, that could have been prevented completely by taking a closer look at the culture of these businesses, what makes them who they are and what makes them successful. And I think this is where the soft topics of leadership and talent and culture become very, very measurable and practical.
Yeah, I can imagine in this time probably the metrics when it comes to financials, projections, revenue, all kind of numbers. They probably made sense. They probably made complete sense. But even though probably there was some sort of a look at the leadership, it wasn't in such a depth and detail that can
Yeah.
predict how could that eventually turn. And of course, I'm sure everybody listening, just like me, would be curious to learn more about what processes do you guys apply? Like, what is your approach towards? Okay, you have a client, let's say, and they are looking into acquiring a company. How do you approach this challenge, this problem?
Hi, we have our proprietary methodology. I think it all stems back from, again, what we're good at, which is executive search. And the core of executive search is learning about people, truly understanding people. And you can apply that in many spheres of life. And we have applied it in leadership due diligence in a way which allows us to truly understand what makes a company successful. And often it is the people within the business, often it is the culture within the business. And initially, when we were designing this, we said, what kind of businesses would this be useful for? And we had this debate and we said, what, maybe it's useful for companies that are in the services environment because they're very people centric and very people oriented. I don't really know if it's useful for companies, let's say, in manufacturing. And then we said, but hold on, in manufacturing, who is behind the R&D? Who is behind the operations? Who is behind the engineering and the processes? It's the head of R&D, it's the head of engineering, and it's the head of supply chain and procurement and all of it. So it's still people. And unless you truly listen and unless you try to understand what they're good at, how they can handle such a transition, what are the synergies that you can utilize within these businesses that are now merging, you'll have a very difficult time in the integration process.
I'm just wondering also, is there any sort of not a backlash, but now we have consultants that are evaluating us, like when you're trying to observe and to analyze and to objectively assess a certain team and company. How do you ensure that actually, these, as we call them, softer topics are actually objectively presented when you do the assessment?
Yeah. That's a very valid question. And it's one that a lot of the companies we work with have been posing on top of, well, how would our target feel if, on top of all the intense due diligence, now we introduce somebody who is de facto assessing them? There's a sense of anxiety already. And it's a really valid question, unless you know how we approach the topic. Because the way we approach the topic is oriented towards really identifying the value and the core cultural competencies in the target. In other words, we've had somebody say to us, one of the people we were assessing, quote unquote, which we're not, but we're talking to within the targets, he was saying, nobody ever asked me before about me. I've been in due diligence processes so many times and nobody cared about me. Nobody spent the time to find out what my leadership style is like and how I've created what I've created as a legacy in this company. And this is amazing because now I feel valued. I feel like the company that wants to buy us cares about the people beyond just the numbers. So I think actually just counterintuitively, almost, instead of creating anxiety, it alleviates anxiety. It gives the leadership from the target the confidence that they will be entering a business which is smart enough to spend resources on understanding them and what's important to them so that they can create the right environment for them.
Right. So they feel this company that wants to merge or acquire us, they actually want to know who we are, and they want to create opportunities and culture and with respect to the kind of areas of development I want to develop in. Like they care about having everybody feeling at home, even though there's going to be a new company, even though there's going to be probably certain traits of the culture that might be a little different or more, because again,
They might
they're
be
very different.
completely, completely.
But they felt hurt. They feel this. They actually care. They want us to win. They want us to succeed. They want us to feel at home, so we're not actually leaving in half a year or 12 months.
That's at the core of it. I mean, look, M&A is about value creation, isn't it? And you're only going to create value by utilizing what's best in the business you're buying. And unless you understand it, you'll never be able to do so. So, yes, people feel heard and people feel appreciated, which is the fundamental I guess, pre-qualification for why they would want to stay within a business.
And since we're talking about leadership due diligence, and I don't know how much you can actually share, but I'll try to get some answers. It's um, what are the kind of metrics? Like, how do you measure, let's say, like an executive or a leader at the position that has a lot of responsibility? What are some of the kind of the traits that you're looking for, or metrics that you're trying to observe and measure?
I will answer you without answering you. There's a lot of things and it's completely situational. So it depends, as with a lot of important things. You can't give a blank answer here because at the end of the day, it depends on the client and it depends on the company. So going back to executive search, say company X is looking for an executive. This executive we find would be the right executive for them. They might not be the right executive for company Y. So this is why it's situational. You evaluate people, you understand people based on the culture, the DNA, and the expectation of the client. And that might vary. They might need somebody entrepreneurial, dynamic, fast paced, decisive, or they might need somebody who's going to calm the water down after a very turbulent time. They might need somebody who is a little bit more level headed. So you don't measure people based on a tick box chart. This is not an exercise of ticking boxes. I think it all goes back to understanding deeply your client and their expectations, and also understanding deeply people. You talk to people in order to go beyond the surface of their current occupation or what they're currently doing or their current achievements. You talk to people to understand what are their core capabilities, their values, their beliefs, their experiences, how they got to where they are today, but also how that experience and capability can be best utilized in the future as well. And if there is a click and if there is a match, if you're good at what you do, you can very quickly sense that.
I perfectly understand, and having in mind you guys have so much years of experience placing executives, placing people, and then tracking afterwards. How did the company evolve after the leaders had been, like, you can, with all this information, experience, in some way it becomes intuitive as well. Like, I mean, you ask the right questions, and I would imagine as well, and maybe you can tell me more about that as well. I would imagine you guys are also, in many ways, the consultants, in terms of you offer the client, help the client to clarify what they're looking for. Because sometimes they'll say, well, we need in the executive search case, right, like, we need a new director of finance, whatever, and they might have an idea what the skill set and the experience is for the person based on the previous person who's been taking the role. But with your help, they can actually define some bigger picture, like the personality trait, the ambition of this person, the values, the more we're coming back to the softer kind of traits that will be a prerequisite for potential future success for the organization, placing this person within this culture.
You're spot on. And sometimes not even that. I'll take it a step further. If it's a new role, they might not even know what they want. So you do indeed become a consultant. And I think this job is way more than what people perceive as executive search. It's actual corporate consultancy, it's management consultancy, because you need to understand these businesses not just from the standpoint of their existing need at the moment. You need to understand their strategy. Unless you see where they're heading, you'll never be able to find the right solution for them. And not just for your client. Actually, that very much translates also towards the people we talk to as potential talent that will transition. You are their executive search consultant, you are their career consultant, you are their coach, you become their confidants, you help them through what is usually a very challenging, emotionally challenging process. Because imagine they've been with the company for 10 years, maybe. They're very well taken care of. They're very senior there. They're loved by their team. And now they're considering making a transition somewhere else. So inevitably, that's an emotional process. And you are there for them. And then you help them with everything from these discussions with their potential new employer to offer negotiation and contract management and onboarding and everything that follows, because you're invested in their success. You're not invested in placing them there. This is not a transaction. You're invested in this person making a profound impact within the business in the years to come.
I love that, and I reminds me of a recent conversation you and I had with a legend, I would say, an icon in the corporate world, but also in the field of servant leadership. Howard Bihar, who's the founding president at Starbucks International. If you guys haven't read this book called "It's Not About the Coffee," go and purchase a coffee right away. One of the best books on company culture. But we had this conversation, and it was interesting what he mentioned, which was in the area of executive search, majority of the companies actually do not care. They care for professionally delivering the job. Here's a person with the same skill set and experience, and they care for closing the deal fast so they can get the commission, move on to the next one. It was, for me, was surprising. It's like, really, we're still there as a leader like him with this experience, sharing that majority of the companies in the executive search recruitment areas are more interested in scale and in numbers, and not as much for caring for the both parts, right? It's a marriage, right? It's the you have the company on the one side, but then you have the person on the other side, and then you have the employees involved, and it has to be a match for everybody for this to work, right? Do you also find the same? I mean, you in this industry, is it that most companies do not actually care enough?
I don't want to comment about other companies. All I know is that, to me, this is way beyond even a marriage. What does a marriage do? It impacts the person and the other person that are getting married. This is something that impacts way more people. Imagine a scenario where you hire a senior executive for a company where he's going to lead, say, 20,000 people. This is directly impacting the lives of 20,000 employees. This is also impacting the lives of their families. This is impacting the lives of their customers. This is impacting the lives of their suppliers. At the end of the day, if you use the multiplier effect, you're impacting hundreds of thousands of people through one decision you help facilitate. So it's an immense responsibility. I think sometimes people forget that. We do it for a living. We talk to hundreds and hundreds of people, but at the end of the day, the decisions you make have a immense impact. And we're extremely fortunate to have the opportunity to talk to some of the brightest minds out there, and it's an incredible privilege, but it's also an incredible responsibility.
And I want to come back to because we're talking about measuring the unmeasurable, but I want to come back to leadership. And I know you are very interested in constantly growing, learning, becoming better, understanding what leadership truly is. And from being around you and Dynamis Group myself, I can say I'm impressed by your leadership. But I'm actually curious, what, if you can describe it, what makes a great leader? What are some of the traits in your perspective, away from this topic, just the leadership due diligence, just what makes a great leader that other people want to follow?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? I don't think there's a singular answer to that either, because I don't believe in all these definition of leadership is, or top 10 skills of a leader. These are wonderful, but I don't believe in them. I actually am much more closely aligned to the idea that leadership needs to be individualized. And I always say this, there's this saying, I don't know who they attribute it to, I think Plato or somebody from the Greek philosophers: beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So beauty is subjective. I think it's the exact same with leadership. Leadership is subjective. So you can't use a copy-paste approach of leadership towards everybody in your team, because their needs are different, their style is different, their way of learning is different, their need of support or autonomy is different. So you need to be able to adapt your approach towards the individual, which is why individualization, I think, needs to be at the core of leadership. And look, it doesn't mean you're not going to be authentic. You're still going to be you. You can't be 1,000 different people. You're still going to stay close to who you are. But in the same time, you will listen, and you will listen actively, and you will listen with the purpose of understanding rather than reacting and rather than judging and making some sort of quick decision. You will listen in a way which will enable you to truly understand what the other person cares about. And this is how you can, at the end of the day, create an environment where people want to stay in and they want to feel appreciated in and they want to work for, because they will feel like they're part of this journey because you care about providing the right environment for them. It goes back to this concept of care, doesn't it? You need to care for something way beyond money. And I mean, a business is a business. It needs to be profitable in order to exist. We're not questioning that. But I'm a firm believer that you can do well as a business while doing good in the same time. And you need to do good by your partners and you need to do good by your team. And it starts in the reverse order. It's the team that comes first, and then everything else follows. So, what is leadership? Again, it's an individualized approach to everybody's needs, I think. So, is there a singular answer to that? I don't think so. At least not in my perception.
You actually came up with a definition which we're going to quote. So thank you.
Please don't.
So, like getting back to, we are drinking our own medicine, right? Like I'm actually curious to hear more about the culture of Dynamis Group. And you recently turned 3, which is crazy, having in mind the kind of milestones you guys achieved, being recognized in 300 years of leadership, one of the most innovative and caring companies in the UK. All the amazing projects do you own, but like it's just 3 years, which is crazy. But I wonder, with this speed, with this dynamic, what is the core of your culture? How did you crafted your own culture?
It's first of all, thank you. It has been just over 3 years now, and it's a little bit of a paradox. In the same time, it feels like a second, and it feels like a century, but in the most beautiful way. About the culture of Dynamis, it's a little bit trial by fire. In the beginning, at least, it was. And you think that because you on a daily basis work with all these amazing thought leaders and business leaders, and you learn from them and you listen to them talk about what leadership is and how they manage their teams and the cultures they create, you think that by listening to them and by reading all these books on leadership, you will be this unbeatable leader. That's not how people learn. At least that's not how I learn. I learn by doing and by making mistakes. So I know throughout the years there have been plenty of mistakes, but there's been a ton of learning as well. And learning has been mostly due to my amazing business partner and the amazing team we have. I learn from our team every single day, no exception. They do things better than we do. They do things differently than we do. And this is probably the biggest learning curve I've had as somebody leading a team. Allow people to surprise you. Allow people to surprise you by doing things differently than how you think they need to be done. Because if you're a little bit type A, you have your vision of how things need to happen, and you're an entrepreneur, and you have your perception just because you've done something very successfully for a while, it should happen this way. No, people can prove you wrong in a great way. And as long as you give them the air, the room to take a risk and do things differently and do them amazingly, they will surprise you. So what is the culture? I think it's a culture where everybody feels free to be themselves, or at least I hope so. I think it's a culture of real collaboration, where the sense of team spirit is at the core of everything, where people support each other without thinking twice about it. I think it's a culture of continuous learning and continuous improvements, We know we're good at what we do. We know we can be so much better at what we do. So we always strive to look at even little things that we can improve, marginal gains, right? Where something small can change and it can make a big impact. But it's a culture where we work super hard. It's an intense business at the end of the day, but we also have a lot of fun doing it. And I think these two can really coexist. You can work really hard with tight deadlines and really demanding clients, but you can also thoroughly enjoy what you do. But it takes for the right person, and I think it starts with the right people, right? If you have the right people doing the right jobs in a company, then half of the job is done already.
And I know that many of the listeners right now are thinking, I want to know. Ellie is in attracting exceptionally gifted talent, industry. They have a great team. Um, I don't know about you, but I on a daily basis I'm meeting entrepreneurs, companies, and that's one of the most asked questions. Toyan, how do we attract the best talent? We are, I don't know, 15, 20 people right now, a startup. We got funding. We need to get 50 more people on board. We want to get the top talent. How do we get the best people on board? What do you believe should we have in mind as entrepreneurs specifically, when it comes to attracting the right kind of people, the top talent, but also people who fit within the type of culture of our organization?
When you're an entrepreneur, I think it's slightly different. And because I know your audience is very much oriented in the startup world, I think when you attract people in a startup environment, you need people that are with the right values because this is still a small team. You don't have this massive team of thousands and thousands of people. So every single individual will be at the core of shaping how this business will be for the years to come. So you do need people with the right fundamentals, the right values that align with yours. What you don't need is people that are identical to you. So you don't need to surround yourself with yes sayers. You don't need to surround yourselves with carbon copies of you. Just the opposite. If you can get people that are different, that think in a way that's going to challenge your perception, beautiful. But also, you need people in a startup environment, especially, that are not going to say, well, this is not in my job description. In the startup world, you do everything. It's a small company, everybody's hands on. One day you will be doing business development, the next day you will be doing delivery on assignments, the next day you'll be doing project management. And you need that mindset. I would look for values, for mindset. I would personally look also for a curious mind. To me, that's very important because a curious mind always challenges positively the paradigm. It challenges positively the status quo, and it also looks for reasons. And when you start to look for reasons, you also start to look for solutions. And in a startup environment, one that is continuously evolving, these sort of curious people actually are propelling the business forward. But I'm not surprised what you're saying. Your contacts and your network, the most important thing they need to do and they need to think about is the people that they surround themselves with. Because a startup is based on an idea, a concept, or a product, but it can only scale if it has the right people on board.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people who are exceptionally good performers, they are not so many in terms of a percentage. And of course, performance and getting things done and being expert in a specific area is not the only trait. They need to also be the right people in terms of fitting
Absolutely.
the organization, the value, the culture. So it becomes even more complicated. And then their
Yeah.
personal desires. They might have both of this, but is that the industry? Is that the cause, the mission that excites them? Do we have the
Yeah.
right kind of package to offer them? So it's so many factors, but indeed, a very, very important area. Like the people in organization, this is what makes a difference. And I'm curious. You kind of touched upon it, but I want to go a little bit deeper on that. Is we talk about performance. I know you. I know you are a high achiever. I know you are positively competitive. And And this is kind of something I think, how do we find this right balance between being highly competitive and being patient and caring?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because there is this inner push for more and more and better and being the number one and excelling at something. With the, again, going back to the mindset of not everybody works the same way as you do. And not everybody has the same, maybe, standards as you do, or the same approach as you do. And you need to be humble because competitive people are sometimes a little bit full of themselves and a little arrogant. Sometimes in a positive way, one that pushes them forward, but sometimes it goes beyond the point where they can learn from others. So I think it goes back a little bit to humility and learning from the people that are surrounding you. But look, competitiveness, I think, is a wonderful trait because you don't need to be competitive with your team or your colleagues. You can be competitive with yourself. This is a type of competitiveness people don't think about, but there is a sense of competition with your own self. Imagine you are, I don't know, you're running track and field, and your time for running 50 meters is whatever seconds. By being competitive with yourself, you constantly lower your time. Same in business. You know you can do something well. By being competitive with yourself, you're constantly pushing yourself to do it better. You can choose to be competitive with the external environment. So you can choose to be competitive with other companies out there in your sector. I'm not sure that's the best formula, or at least it's not the formula for me. I think you need to be competitive with yourself. So you need to be constantly improving on your own performance rather than get preoccupied or worry about what everyone else out there is doing and trying to beat the competition. Don't beat the competition, beat yourself.
There was this quote by Michael Jordan. He once said, and he's a extreme version of competitive, right?
Yeah.
But we all seen the Last Dance documentary on Netflix, I guess. So, but there was this quote when he would say, "I don't compete with anybody else. I compete with the best that I can possibly be every single day." So that's of course that's an extreme version of this, but but
He,
it's true.
he's a star for a reason, but we also need to keep in mind he wasn't the easiest to work with, was
Not
he?
at all. Not
He
at
was
all.
very
He was a
challenging.
bully. He was a
He was a
bully.
bully. He was a bully. But didn't he make everybody else better in his team?
He did. He did. So it's very debatable.
It
Was he a
is.
great leader? It's did he push everybody to achieve anything beyond they ever imagined? Not just himself, but being there, coaching them, spending time with them, motivating, challenging them to be better. To exceed what they can in that practice, to do whatever. Like, did they achieve beyond their wildest imagination? That for sure. Was he the kindest and most caring one? Debatable, right? What does care mean? Um,
Could
there's
it be
many.
pushing others? Could it be pushing others beyond what they think are their limits? That also could be care. Was he a great leader? I don't know. I think he was the greatest leader he could be. He pushed himself to do the best he could do. Is he universally the most amazing leader there ever has been? Probably not. But who knows? Time will tell. The legacy they've created and the legacy they've left, nobody can challenge that. So who are we to say he made others miserable? Maybe he didn't. Maybe through what they achieved at the end, they were the happiest people they were.
Yeah, maybe they needed this tough love.
Maybe, maybe.
All right.
This is
And
why it's not a soft topic, is it? It's a hard topic.
no, it's not. It's not. We had the podcast. One of the first episode actually was um, Simon Hodges, who is a billionaire coach. So he spends quite a bit of time with billionaires and their families, helping them to. I mean, there's a lot of things he helps them with, but one of the things he said is, I help them with connection and love. They hire me for finance, like governance, this and that and that. And then at the end of the day, most of the thing that we work on is connection and love. And it's like love is not soft at all. Love is, we don't like to talk about love in the corporate perspective and business world, but for him, love is is hard. It's tough love. It's you gotta tell people the truth. You gotta challenge
Mm,
people, like if you love
mm.
them. So yeah, we can go deeper this rabbit hole, but actually, I wanna go into another one, which is again, productivity mastery. Many people listen to this podcast because they want to be more productive. And I wonder, for you as a leader, as a managing partner of the organization, how do you manage your time, having in mind, well, I need to be the leader, I need to delegate, I need to set up goals, deadlines, objectives for my team, and to coach them, feedback them, like take care of the team.
Yeah.
But I need to get things done. I need to be also down in the trenches, operational, work with clients, like do the work. So how do you navigate and balance? Like, do you have any kind of I need to spend this percentage of my time on my own tasks and this percentage on leading the team? Or how do you manage your time and resources?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I remember once discussing this with you. I don't think you can do things halfway. Nothing in life, if you want to do it well, you don't do it halfway. So you don't do 50% attention on the team, 50% attention on your clients, and then whatever else is needed. You do 100% on everything. When you support your team, you support them 100%. When you work with your clients, you give 100% of yourself to that. I am a believer in multitasking, even though I know people say multitasking doesn't exist. Maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe it's your ability to give yourself fully to whatever you're doing at this point of time. And if somebody needs you, you drop what you're doing and you help them. And if you're super focused on supporting your clients through a crisis or a difficult situation, you do 100% of what you can to help them. So in my world, there is no split. There is no halfway doing anything. You do it as much as you can. And yeah, maybe the only way to do so is create more hours in the day. Because, I mean, none of us is superhuman. But you find what works for you. And you also find a way to take care of yourself because, right, you talk about productivity. It's by being 100% or trying to be 100% at what you do, it's very easy to fall in the trap of burnout or hyper stress or feeling unhappy or unfulfilled with what you do. So you need to find a way to take care of yourself as well so that you can also take care of your team and your partners.
Are you a to-do list kind of person? Do you love, and if so, is that a paper or something, or do you have any kind of a tool software that you use?
I have my mind, and for many years, I used to shove all sorts of information in my mind, which, as you can imagine, we talk to hundreds and hundreds of people. I would know everybody's name, everybody's desires, everybody's place of work, every detail about everybody, top of mind. Um, and at some point, of course, your mind fills up with stuff. But it's also like a muscle. I think you train it because if you let it become lazy by only using software, then you will be at some point in a situation where you will have to improvise and you will have to think top of mind of something and you won't be able to because you have allowed your mind to become lazy. So there is a balance. I'm not advocating just for utilizing your brain for everything. I do to-do lists. I do them on paper, a bit old school with that. But if I'm on the go, I have now started using my phone as well. Something I've recently started doing, if I'm reading a really cool book, I used to be like, oh, this is such an amazing thought. I will remember that and I'll discuss it with somebody later because it's so cool. And of course, I forget it. So now, if I'm reading a really cool book, I make a note of something that impressed me so that I can then have a discussion with somebody about it. And once you have a discussion with somebody, the thought becomes an idea. It's not just something you read, it evolves into an idea because there is a debate and maybe you implement it in something you've done. So I do everything. I use my mind, I use pen and paper, I use my phone. Of course, for business purposes, we use all sort of tools that are helpful. But my main advice, I think, is just don't over rely on everything else. Trust yourself as well, because you need to train yourself. Otherwise, it's like everything. It's like in sports. The less you train, the less your body will respond to certain stimuli. The more you train, the more muscle memory happens, and the easier it becomes.
And sometimes the best tools, as you said, is like pen and paper. I interviewed David Allen, the author of the iconic methodology Getting Things Done, and I was wondering, what do you use? And he showed me his notebook. It's like pen and paper.
Yeah.
And he has this actually
Definitely.
very, he has a very interesting, he likes to say, the problem is your mind doesn't have one. So that means you don't have the unlimited capacity to store
No.
information and make sense of
Mm,
it. So I do agree. You don't want to be too lazy and everything is on, somewhere in external drive, like just like with your computer, right? Like you have a
yeah.
lot of softwares and things on your computer. Not everything is on an external drive,
Yeah.
but at some point you don't have enough capacity to store
True.
everything.
True.
So,
True.
and if it's overcrowded, like I don't know about you, I have a Mac. When I have very little space on the Mac, it's slow. It's
Yeah.
it doesn't process it well, right? It's the
It
same with our
is.
minds, I think. So
True.
find the right balance. I'm a big believer in external drive system, meaning getting things out of your head and making sense of them, so you can have a chance to prioritize better, but you shouldn't only rely on external drives. So
No.
yeah.
It's both.
Anyway, we're on the same page here, and I wanna kind of wrap up this episode. There's 10 more minutes. We want to talk about um, crisis management actually, and managing stress. Last 2 3 years, very interesting time in a global perspective for pandemic, war in Ukraine, energy crisis, global recession. Everybody's talking about that's just knocking at the door. Many people say we're already in a global recession due to the definition,
Yeah.
but also they say that we haven't even started feeling the consequences of it. So I'm curious to hear from your experience, and if you would be kind to actually share the story of the establishment of Dynamis Group, which was you started with a crisis, so to say. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about the um, you know these early days, and for the audience who's listening, actually Ellie and the team, they've been working for several years, more than 10 years probably, together in the same industry. But when they started establishing the company, there was an interesting set of events, and I'm sure that helped you to build resilience. But I'm curious to hear, first of all, what if you can share the story of your establishment. What did you have to go through, and what were some of the lessons when it comes to stress management and crisis management?
Okay. Yeah, it was a challenging time, and that's a euphemism for how difficult it was. So without going into a lot of the nitty gritty details, my business partner and I, we've been working together again for more than a decade. And in 2019, when the time came, we decided to go through a separation of the previous company we were part of and incorporate on our own. And that was very turbulent and it was very difficult. And we started from zero. No, actually, we started from a massive minus, is where we started Dynamis. And there was a period of several months which you can't even imagine how difficult it can get before it gets there. And I wasn't prepared. None of us were prepared how to handle a crisis. Now, hindsight is 2020. My best advice would be prepare for a crisis before it happens. Now, back at the time, of course, you jump into this journey, and it just so happens that you feel like everything around you is like a vortex. It's like a whirlpool. You don't know where's up, where's down, where's left, where's right. There's water everywhere. And I think the first and foremost thing is you need to know where your true north is. You need to have your compass straight. You need to know your footing. In other words, you have to have your value system, your beliefs dead on in life in general. Because when crisis hits and you have no idea where the light is coming from, you need to know what your fundamentals are. The second thing, I think you need a very stable shoulder to lean on. Nobody can go through a crisis on their own. And I was lucky enough to have my business partner, and I think he was lucky enough to have me because we both supported each other. when we needed it. We both had times of weakness and times of strength, and these alternated. So we were there for each other when the other needed it. And you need to have that implicit trust. You need to trust them implicitly. There can't be any doubt or hesitation. There needs to be true partnership. And I think the third thing is, and people don't really think about it, you need to take care of your health as well, because it can get very badly damaged. And you think you have this habit of being athletic and being healthy and whatever, and then you go through a period of immense stress and your body responds negatively. So you need to have a very solid focus on whether this is good food for you, whether this is sports, whether this is fitness, or whatever makes you feel healthy physically. These are connected. So the physical dimensions of you are very much connected to the mental dimensions of you, and one feeds into the other. So, healthy mind, healthy body, right? And the reverse is true. So I think these are the three things. Have your compass straight, have somebody to rely on, and make sure you stay physically healthy as well. I mean, I know people use different things. Some people do gratitude journals, maybe because in a time of difficulty, you still need to know what you're grateful for, because surely there's something positive happening. Some people meditate or listen to music or go out in nature or spend more time with friends and loved ones, whatever works for you. But I think these three are the kind of the fundamental things that will help you with a crisis. And it's been difficult last few years, hasn't it, with everything that's been happening, and nobody guarantees you it's gonna get easier. It might not get easier, but if you're prepared and if you know what you're doing and you can learn through these crisis moments, because each of them is an opportunity to learn and hopefully not repeat your own mistakes, because surely you made mistakes along the way, then chances are you will be better off something like this happens.
There, still remember, I think it was 2019 actually, just at the time that we teamed up and actually we partnered up on a project. So I flew to Manchester, and we did a team offsite for a company in Manchester, and it was interesting. I visited you guys, and I think your office was your house garden at the time.
My office was my house, and I thought, you know what, I have this beautiful big garden, and we can work from the garden. And I completely forget I live in the UK, in Manchester, and you can work in your garden in the sunshine one day out of 365 days. So we ended up using my house as the office, which was a funny story now in retrospect, because things have changed significantly since then. But just like any startup that starts from somebody's basement or garage or whatever, well, we started from my garden.
Back in the 60s, I think it was John F. Kennedy using the metaphor of what does the Chinese word for crisis mean, and I don't know if it's exactly that. I checked it on Wikipedia. It says it has different meanings, but in a nutshell, and I love the metaphor anyway, it's a combination of two words, and the first word is danger, and the second word could be translated as opportunity. And I really love this metaphor because crisis is made out of danger, it's made out of opportunity, right? So on the one side, and you said it really well, you got to get ready, you got to get prepared. The storm is coming. What are the risk areas? What are the dangers? What are potential risks in our industry with the people, cash flows, all these kind of things? But then on the other side, it's like, what opportunities are out there? How can we get the most out of it? What is going to happen if we survive the storm? What's the new beginnings that come out of it? And I just maybe kind of as a final question, I would like to, if you can reflect a little bit on because you guys started with a crisis, right? Like what do you see were some of the opportunities now that you reflect backwards, or some of the great things that happened thanks to you, Marian, and the rest of the team actually going through the crisis? What was the biggest blessings out of these events?
I think the biggest blessing by far was rediscovering the passion for what we do, because we had the chance to do it the way we believed needs to be done. And you don't always have the opportunity to start afresh. However, start afresh with a lot of accumulated knowledge. The learnings were, again, the fact that you need to be prepared. You need to take every opportunity as such. I was listening to Simon Sinek recently, and he said there's a cost to everything in life. So you're incredibly successful. Another area in your life might be a second priority, something you always pay in some shape or form for some of the successes you have. Maybe you spend a little bit less time with other people in your life. Maybe whatever, your health might suffer. But he was saying there's cost to every success, but there's also a learning in every challenge. So instead of going through the challenge with a victim mentality and constantly saying, why is it happening to me? This is not fair. I don't deserve it. Just go through it. Literally keep on walking, go through it, and then stop for a second, reflect, and say, you know what? This has been incredibly difficult, but it was also probably the most formative experience in my life. And I think it might remain that. I think this reinvigorated passion and ability to do things in a way that we believe needs to be done is the legacy of what we've gone through.
When you were talking about it, I just remember there was a quote by billionaire hedge fund. I think that Ray Dalio, he's one of the, if not the largest hedge fund ever created, is the founder. He wrote a book called Principles, and he had this principle, one of the principles: pain plus reflection equals progress.
Interesting.
So pain by itself is not,
Yeah.
it's not a
Yeah.
prerequisite. You need to
No.
reflect. You got to get the lesson, right?
Otherwise, it's just pain.
Yes, and suffering. So
Suffering.
Ellie, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Wow,
Same.
so much insight, so much valuable information for leadership, for going through crisis, for executive search, attracting talent. I wonder, where could people find you, find Dynamis, and if they're interested to work with you, who are the people that should check out what you guys do, and how can you serve them?
They can easily find us on dynamisgroup.com. They can find us on LinkedIn. Both the company and each of us individually on LinkedIn is probably an easy way to connect. But beyond that, we're there to serve everybody who is a caring leader. And a caring leader is one that cares about the people that they're surrounded with and surrounded by. So whether it's a startup founder, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's somebody who's looking to sell their business, whether it's somebody who's looking to buy a business, whether it's somebody who has grown a massive corporation and is now looking to strengthen the team by attracting amazing talent to their structure, or somebody who is considering what's next for them in their life journey professionally. We're happy to talk to them. We're happy to exchange ideas. We're happy to help them reflect on their own and hopefully support them in their journey.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ellie. Thanks everybody for joining us, for staying until minute 63. This was episode 123, meaning 123rd episodes, and there's 122 more episodes. If you're interested in these type of topics, leadership, entrepreneurship, productivity, performance, team culture, go check it out. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share with a friend, be a giver, and see you once again next week for another exciting episode of Productivity Mastery. Have an amazing day, guys. See you next time.
See ya. Thank you, Sam.